The Q's powers, do they come from technology or biology? Welcome to SciTrek, your sci-fi TV and movie channel. I've always wondered, where do the Q's powers come from? Now, we know very little about the origin of the Q. What we do know, we actually have to infer from what he says and what other Q entities have said and what we see them do. So, it's an age-old argument, and one that I'm probably going to get really a lot of crap on the comments for, but is the Q's powers based on technology, or is it something that they evolved? I'm going to say straight up, it's technology. I don't believe the Q's powers could be evolved. They're too magical, and I don't like magic in sci-fi. And I do have an argument that backs up this. So, the first time we ever see the Q, we see that ball of energy, that field that actually then has to chase and captures the Enterprise. Why would Q have to do that if his powers were really omnipotent and unlimited? If his powers were really godlike, he could have just clicked his fingers and shut the engines down, but instead he had to chase them. Now, you could say, and you could argue, that was all part of basically the game he was playing, that he was actually trying to scare the humans and trying to make them feel weak. But the fact is, he still did it that way. So it does seem to feel like that was some sort of technological capability, rather than a godlike click of the fingers and just manifest his will into reality. Also there is all the clicking and the eye gestures and the things like this. There seems to be gestures required to sort of activate the powers. Why is he clicking his fingers? Why is there a big flash of light all the time? Unless this is some sort of activation process or something that is required for him to focus his psychic energy, say, or his mental energy onto activating the process. It seems to be that all the Q have that little hand wave, all these hand gestures that are required for the powers to work. And that reminds me of the Trelani character, who obviously might have been a Q. Anybody that says he wasn't, you can't really say that. So, from the original series, The Squire of Gathos, we saw this character Trelani. Now, he had many similar characteristics to the Q. He also seemed to be similar powers. They had the power to transform energy into matter and matter into energy without any real problem. They had mastered that. Something that gave them godlike powers. But we know Trelani's powers were based on technology, the mirror that became broken, and we saw the tech behind it. Other people have argued, though, that actually Trelani isn't a Q because his parents turn up. At the end of the episode, his parents basically come and tell him off for what he's been up to. But I would actually argue that we see similar things to that with the Q. For example, the episode Deja Queue in The Next Generation, where Q is punished for his naughty behaviour and sent to the Enterprise without his powers. He is stripped of all his powers. Now, the Council that we see repeatedly in episodes, saying like Q Squared later, where we see Q Junior for the first time, and you have the judging panel, come across very much like parents. They come across very much like the characters do in the original series episode with Trelani. I would argue that they are very similar. But there's also a big problem that the Q are actually a species that exist out of time. So, Trelani could have been a far earlier version of the Q. Maybe before their powers had sort of evolved a little bit further. Maybe before the continuum existed. Because once the Q got to a point where they sort of exist out of time, you never know what you're actually coming in contact with. You could come in contact with a far later, far older Q before meeting a far younger Q. They don't exist in a linear time like we do. They can jump around through time frames really as much as they like. We don't know when the Q could have evolved. There is one theory that Q is so interested in humans because actually humans become the Q eventually, and that is them coming back to try and move us along that path. That's not a theory I actually subscribe to. I don't believe the Q are. I believe the Q are a species, or maybe a group of species, that evolved and became this later. But if you think about Arthur C. Clarke, he always said that if we came in contact with an alien species, if it was sufficiently advanced enough technologically, we would not be able to discern the difference between that technology and magic. I believe the Q are very similar. I think they have merged with that technology, that they're actually potentially maybe even a hybrid, that they were maybe have some innate abilities, because we do see species with abilities that we would consider almost magical, like psychic. Troy, for example, is a Beta Z. She has psychic, empathic abilities. We've seen other species that have very much godlike powers, but we again don't know that they could be a version of the Q themselves. There is also a point though that if the Q is technologically based, why haven't we seen any of that technology through some of the other episodes? Well, maybe we have. The Guardian of Forever is a gateway that has appeared in many brilliant episodes, including actually one of my favourite episodes from Discovery. It's when Spock and Kirk asked it, "What are you? Are you technology or are you a being?" He basically said, "I'm neither. I am my own beginning and my own end." It felt like Q-type technology. Maybe that was a technology built by the ancestors of the Q before they ascended up into the continuum. What that object was capable of is something that we see with the Q. It seems to be something that the Q would use. Perhaps that is a relic of the Q before they ascended up to the continuum. I also have to wonder though as well, why are the Q so bothered about the Borg? They obviously sent the Enterprise D out to make contact with the Borg as a test, but also then in, again, the Voyager episode with Q Jr., Q Jr. brings a couple of Borg cubes right on the doorstep of Voyager. Janeway is about to get assimilated when Q appears. He grabs hold of Q Jr. and throws him down and says, "If we've told you once, we've told you 1,000 times. You don't antagonize the Borg." Why? Why is he so bothered about antagonizing the Borg? Now, a lot of people would argue that they wouldn't be interested in the Borg. They can click their fingers and make them all disappear. But they don't. Why? Maybe the Q are interested in keeping the Borg at bay, because at some point in the future the Borg themselves could become a threat to the Q. If the Q is technologically based, even though that technology might be way beyond anything we can actually imagine, the Borg could get to a point where, similarly how they moved into fluidic space, they could maybe try to get into the continuum space. That maybe if there is a species that could adapt to the way the Q work and the technology the Q use, that perhaps the Borg are that. And that even though the Borg aren't a threat at the moment, in our time frame, in the next generation time frame, that they could become a threat in the future. So antagonizing them and bringing attention to yourselves as the Q might not be the best idea. There is also the basic argument that actually, even though the Q say they have godlike powers, they obviously don't. They are repeatedly surprised. In the next generation, Gainan appears up from behind the bar. Q doesn't know she's there and is surprised to see her. He also then is about ready to get rid of her, and Gainan seems to be ready to defend herself. Now, I would argue that Gainan was doing that because maybe she knew she could defend herself. Even when Q is in the Voyager episodes, he doesn't expect Voyager to be there. He is surprised. He actually says, you lot aren't supposed to be here for another 100 years. He doesn't seem to have godlike powers because he is constantly surprised. Again, is that because his powers are technologically based? And even though they are amazing, they're not unlimited. I would also argue that actually the Q threaten to wipe out mankind. That is basically what they're threatening to do at the start of the Next Generation series and again at the end. I don't think they actually could though. They might be able to go back in time and stop us from ever evolving, but can they click their fingers and just wipe us out of existence? The problem with that is I don't think they actually have the power to do that, and it is why they don't. In the same way that the Next Generation level of technology, like the replicator, would seem like magic to us today, the Q technology seems like magic just because it's far enough advanced that we don't understand it. Please leave a comment, tell me what you think. Is the Q's powers godlike, omnipotent, born with, evolved, whatever? however you want to put it? Are they a being with that energy? Or is it technology based? Or is it perhaps a hybrid, a mix of the two? And if you are new to the channel, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. It really helps me out. You can join the channel, please. There's a link in the description, and give a small amount of money every month. It really helps me to create more content. I don't have to rely on the YouTube pennies then. And you can also join us on Facebook. Again, a link in the description. Please, guys, leave a comment. Tell me what you think, and stay safe. I'll see you next time.